Before I get into this video, I just want to apologize. I want to apologize because everything that I'm about to talk about in this video is in many ways my fault. And when I say my fault, I don't mean it's literally only my fault, but people who approached the election in 2024 with the same mentality as myself, we are at fault for everything that I'm about to talk about in this video. Now, right now I'm sitting outside of my elementary school. This is the school that I went to from ages 7 through 11. And I remember in 2008, I would have been 8 years old, 3rd grade, they held a student election for the presidency. Now at the time, the two candidates were Barack Obama and John McCain. We're 8 years old. We don't know anything about politics. We don't know anything about politics. Even if our parents tried to explain politics to us, we didn't have the mental bandwidth, the intellectual development to understand what they were saying. Granted, I still think it was a good idea to encourage students to put their voices out there, but clearly I didn't learn my lesson. But I remember at that time, I voted for Barack Obama. Didn't know much about him at all. I'm not gonna lie, at the time, I just voted for him because he was black. I'm not gonna lie. But I was 8 years old, so cut me some slack. Now, I remember maybe a few days later, they tallied up all the votes, and on the morning announcements, they said that John McCain had won. Now, of course, in the actual election, Obama had won, but John McCain won the school election, which meant that, again, we were 8 years old, and I guess it was the whole school, so everyone was 11 and under. But the point is, we didn't really know what we were voting for. But anyways, I'm not gonna lie, at the time, I was a little bit sad. I was kind of sad that McCain won the student election, but I didn't really know why. I just felt that at that time, that meant that maybe I was a lot different from my classmates. And I don't know what the entire results were, how many people voted for Obama versus McCain. But what I do know is that years later, seeing who is in office right now, President Donald Trump, I feel the same feeling. I feel as if maybe I think a little bit differently from the people who at least live in this area. Because again, these were people who basically developed their political ideals from their parents, and a lot of those people probably still live within this area, the Lewisville, Texas area. So a lot of these people who voted for McCain in that school election probably went on to vote for Trump in this past election. And look, I'm not saying that if I had voted against Trump, that Trump wouldn't have still won. I don't know. What I do know is that I'll never know now because Trump is in office. And why am I suddenly speaking about Trump again? Because you know I don't like to talk about politics. Granted, I don't say I'm apolitical anymore. I would say I definitely lean left. But the reason why I'm even making this video is because a couple days ago, it was Juneteenth. If you don't know what Juneteenth is, basically it's a holiday celebrating the release, the freedom, the legal freedom of black slaves in America. And this holiday is generally a paid holiday, and Trump, for whatever reason, decided to take the opportunity of Juneteenth to note that he believes Americans have too many paid holidays. Now, look, I've never worked a 9-to-5 here in the US. I've never worked a salaried position, nor have I ever worked a salaried position in Europe because, of course, I'm an entrepreneur. But I found this to be really, really frightening, actually. I found it to be really frightening seeing Trump say something like this because, as far as I'm aware, America is behind on this regard. America actually doesn't have enough paid holidays for their employees, at least from a standardized perspective. There are some outlier examples where you have people who work really, really cushy jobs where their health insurance is taken care of and they have maybe 5 or 6 weeks of paid vacation. Those are the people who are at the top of the top. In Europe, that is your average citizen. That is your average person living in Europe. And that's something that I've been sort of beating to death in my videos, is this idea that your average European is actually living as well on paper as your top of the top American in many ways in terms of the quality of life. They may not be driving Ferraris, and they're probably also not pulling out exorbitant car loans to pay for those Ferraris, so it all balances out. But the point is, Europeans are living much better than Americans, and the reason why is because of their political choices. Now, again, in the past, I've been pretty dismissive of politics in general because I always had this belief that it's not the government's job to fix my situation or to fix other people's situations. It's my job. It's my job to fix my situation, and everyone else is responsible for fixing their own individual situations. But if I subscribe to that belief, then I have to ask myself, what's the point of having a government at all? There's no point. There's no point in having a government. There's no point in having any taxes at all. There's no reason to have any of this structure at all. As a matter of fact, why even have society? We have society to improve the quality of life of everyone in it. So, bearing that in mind, if that's the fundamental reason why we have society, why do we continue to vote for people? And I say we because, again, me not voting against Trump effectively meant that I voted for him. And I apologize for that again, because I know I probably made a lot of people's lives worse by doing that. Won't be making that mistake again. But when we vote for people like Trump, we are objectively making society worse. Because when you look at the quality of life indexes, when you look at the surveys of general happiness, you see that European countries almost always come out on top. America is never at the top of those surveys, despite being the wealthiest nation on the planet. And I know a lot of people say it's not actually the wealthiest nation because of the debt, things of that nature, but on paper, it's seen as the wealthiest nation on the planet, and yet we're not the happiest nation on the planet. Because, of course, having more, just being wealthy, individual success, doesn't necessarily correlate with happiness and well-being. Of course, there's some correlation, but there's also diminishing returns. And I think the people who voted for Trump are the kinds of people who still ascribe to the idea that they can wealth their way to happiness. And I was once one of those people. Granted, I never would have directly voted for Trump, but I definitely once thought that, again, it was my responsibility to become rich so that I could insulate myself from the problems that the majority of Americans face. In other words, this is an analogy that I came up with recently. Instead of trying to fix the roads, I just wanted to buy a nicer car so I didn't have to feel the bumps. And what I've come to realize is that Europeans take a much more pragmatic approach to problem solving, especially when it comes to politics, which is that it's not their responsibility to go and buy a nicer car to not feel the bumps in the road. It's their responsibility to vote for people who will go ahead and fix the roads, fix the fundamental issues, thus making everyone's life better and more convenient. And it's interesting, we talk about the land of the free. America's the land of the free, home of the brave, but I don't really see that with the choices that Americans have been making in terms of who we're voting into office. I just don't see it. I don't see where the freedom is at. As a matter of fact, I saw a video pretty recently where somebody was secretly recording Trump saying that he wanted Americans to respect him the way North Koreans respect Kim Jong-un. I don't know, maybe that video was AI generated. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, because if that was real, if that was a real video, then I'm very glad that my girlfriend and I will be leaving here in the next couple of days, because that's absolutely ridiculous. But a lot of people, they don't have the luxury of being able to leave. A lot of people here are actually much more impoverished than you would think, considering that this is the wealthiest nation on the planet. And ironically, the people who are impoverished, especially in these quote-unquote red conservative states, states like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, etc., states that have the highest poverty rates and the lowest education rates in the country, those are the states that are voting for Trump the most heavily. And on one hand, I want to say I don't really understand it. You would think that if people are considering their best interest, no matter how you view it, whether you're viewing it from a selfish standpoint or from a standpoint of wanting to increase the well-being of your fellow citizens, I don't really see what benefit you gain from voting for Trump. I think what it is that, again, these are states with very, very bad education. And that's actually something I've noticed, is that the places where people are the most educated, the most informed, are generally places where people vote against people like Trump. I don't know, maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe there's a correlation there. I don't know. I know that in Europe, people generally have a higher level of education. And when I say level, that doesn't mean that they necessarily attended more schooling. It's just that the quality of their schooling was better, because European schools tend to be better than American schools. Those countries with the higher levels of schooling generally vote for people who don't have really anything in common with Trump, who don't share ideals that Trump tends to propagate, or people who support Trump tend to propagate. Now look, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm the most informed on political policy by any means. I'm not. I can't tell you anything that Trump is doing in terms of his actual political policy. Maybe he's actually been a good president, I don't know. But I know he's not a good leader. He is not a good leader, because good leaders don't want their people to suffer. Good leaders don't want their people to be subservient to them. Good leaders care about the people that they are serving, and they understand that it's their job to serve the people who follow them, not the other way around.